I'm a 28-year-old guy from what you'd probably call a wealthy family. Growing up, everything looked perfect from the outside. My parents were the kind that hosted fancy dinner parties, went on yearly vacations abroad, and made sure we had everything we needed. But anyone looking in from the outside wouldn't see what was actually happening inside our family. I have an older sister, Lily, who's 30 now. To everyone else, Lily is the perfect golden child. She's smart, charming, and knows exactly what to say to win people over. She's the kind of person who can get out of a speeding ticket just by smiling and making small talk with the officer. It's been like this our entire lives. My parents practically worshipped her growing up. If Lily wanted something, she got it. And if I wanted something, it was usually met with, well, let's see what Lily thinks. Despite that, we had a decent sibling relationship. We'd hang out, go to family events together, and she'd even call me her favorite brother, even though I'm her only brother. For years, I just accepted that she was the favorite. It was like an unspoken family rule. Lily gets the spotlight, and I'm the one standing just outside of it. I'm not saying my childhood was bad, just that it was clear I wasn't the priority. Things started changing a few years ago. Lily's always had a string of boyfriends, one after another. She's the type who falls hard and fast, and when it ends, it's a complete disaster. And every time it happened, I noticed a pattern. She'd come to me for comfort, which was fine at first because, she's my sister. But then she started making these weird comments. Stuff like, it's a good thing I have you as my backup plan. Or, if all else fails, I know I can always count on you. At first, I laughed it off. It sounded like a joke, and I figured it was just her way of coping with a breakup. It was awkward, sure, but not something I thought too deeply about. But then she started saying it more often, and it became less of a joke and more like she meant it. The last few times, she said it in front of our parents and even some of our mutual friends, and everyone just laughed along like it was some inside joke I wasn't in on. It didn't really hit me how serious it was until my girlfriend, Sophie 26F, pointed it out. We've been together for almost 2 years now, and she's great, supportive, kind, and not afraid to call out weird behavior when she sees it. Sophie has noticed these comments from Lily and pulled me aside one day, asking why I let her say those things. She told me it was disrespectful, not just to me but to our relationship as well. I tried to brush it off, telling Sophie that it's just how Lily is and that it doesn't mean anything. But Sophie wouldn't let it go. She said it made her uncomfortable, and that it felt like Lily was treating me like a backup option for her own failed relationships. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. It's like every time Lily said it, she was reminding me that I'd always be her safety net, whether I wanted to be or not. I started paying more attention to what was happening during family gatherings. The last few months, Lily's backup plan comments have become bolder. She said it during my dad's birthday dinner while everyone was sitting at the table. I was just sitting there with a glass of wine, listening to my parents talk about their plans for a holiday trip, when Lily casually said, "Oh, well, if I'm still single by 35, I'll just marry my brother." Everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke, but Sophie looked at me like she couldn't believe what she just heard. Later that night, Sophie asked me if I was okay with Lily saying stuff like that. And I realized, no, I wasn't okay with it. It was weird, inappropriate, and honestly a little creepy. But when I brought it up with my parents, they completely brushed me off. My mom said, "Oh, she's just teasing you. Don't take it so seriously." My dad laughed and said, "You're her brother. Of course she feels safe with you." It's not just my parents, though. Even some of our friends seem to think it's funny. Last week, we were at a small gathering with a few of our mutual friends, and one of them made a joke about Lily and me ending up together if she stays single. Lily didn't deny it. She just smiled and said, "Well, it's good to have a plan, right?" And everyone laughed like it was the most normal thing in the world. But it's not normal. It's not normal to treat your sibling like a romantic fallback option. It's not normal to joke about ending up with your brother if all your relationships fail. I realized I've been letting this go on for way too long because I didn't want to make waves or upset the family dynamic. But now it's affecting my relationship with Sophie, and I can't just ignore it anymore. Sophie has been pushing me to say something, to finally confront Lily and tell her it's not okay. I've been putting it off because I know it's going to be a huge blow-up. My parents will probably take Lily's side as they always do, and I'll end up looking like the bad guy for making a big deal out of just a joke. But it's not just a joke anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. I'm done being the backup plan. I haven't decided when or how I'm going to confront her, but it's going to happen soon. I can't keep letting this slide. It's time I set some boundaries, even if it means upsetting the golden child and causing drama in the family. I just hope it doesn't end up being as bad as I think it will be. Update 1. I decided it was time to confront Lily, and I chose to do it during a family dinner. It was at our parents' house, a typical Sunday evening meal that we've been having for as long as I can remember. My girlfriend Sophie was with me, and I could tell she was nervous too. She knew this was going to be a big deal, but I felt like I had no choice. The comments had gone too far, and I couldn't let it slide anymore. Everything started off as usual. My mom had cooked a huge spread, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and all the fixings. My dad was talking about his golf game, and Lily was sipping on her wine, already acting like she owned the place. It was just casual small talk, but I was barely listening. I kept waiting for the right moment to bring it up, and then it happened. Right in the middle of a conversation about my cousin's upcoming wedding, Lily made her usual joke. She laughed and said, "Well, if I'm still single by 35, I guess I'll just have to marry my brother." She said it in this carefree, joking tone, and everyone at the table burst into laughter like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Even my parents were laughing, shaking their heads like it was some inside joke they were in on. I looked over at Sophie, and she wasn't laughing. She was giving me this look that said, "Are you really going to let this slide again?" So I took a deep breath and decided to speak up. I interrupted the laughter and asked, "What do you mean by that, Lily? Why do you keep calling me your backup plan?" The whole room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. My mom stopped mid-bite, and my dad put down his wine glass, clearly taken aback. No one was expecting me to actually say something. Lily tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a joke and that I was taking it too seriously. But I didn't let it go this time. I told her that these comments were making me uncomfortable, and more importantly, they were affecting my relationship with Sophie. I said it wasn't funny to joke about using me as some kind of fallback option if her love life didn't work out. That's when Sophie jumped in. She looked right at my parents and said that the comments were disrespectful not just to me but to our relationship too. It was the first time Sophie had ever spoken up like that in front of my family, and I think it shocked everyone. My mom looked like she didn't know what to say, and my dad just stared at Sophie like she'd grown a second head. Instead of taking it seriously, my parents immediately jumped to Lily's defense. My mom said, "Oh, come on, she's just teasing. It's just a joke between siblings. You know how Lily is." My dad nodded in agreement, telling me that I was being too sensitive and that I needed to relax. They made it sound like it was my fault for causing a scene, completely ignoring how uncomfortable the whole thing was making me and Sophie. Lily, sensing that our parents were on her side, leaned back in her chair and smirked. She finally admitted, without any shame, that she sees me as her safety net. She said, "I just know that if things go wrong in my life, you'll be there for me. You're my brother, and that's what family does, right?" It wasn't a joke anymore. It was a statement, like she was entitled to my support, no matter what. I lost it. I told her that I wasn't her safety net, and it wasn't fair for her to treat me like some kind of backup plan she could fall back on whenever her life didn't go as planned. I said it was manipulative, and it wasn't okay for her to undermine my relationship with Sophie by making comments like that. The whole room felt like it was about to explode from the tension. My mom tried to calm me down, saying I was overreacting and that I was the one ruining the family dinner. My dad looked furious, like I had embarrassed the family by speaking up, but I didn't care anymore. I stood up, grabbed Sophie's hand, and told them we were leaving. We walked out without another word, and I could hear my mom calling after us, but I didn't stop. As soon as we got home, my phone started blowing up with text messages from my mom. She was furious, saying that I needed to apologize to Lily for causing a scene and making everyone uncomfortable. She kept repeating that it was just a joke, and I shouldn't have taken it so seriously. I ignored her messages and put my phone on silent. I couldn't believe she was actually mad at me for standing up for myself. Sophie hugged me and told me she was proud of me for finally saying something. It felt good to have her support, but I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. I knew my parents would take Lily's side, and I was right. The next morning, I got a call from my dad, who told me that if I didn't apologize and make things right with Lily, they might have to rethink my place in the family. I talked to my friends about what happened, and they were all shocked. They couldn't believe Lily had actually admitted to seeing me as her backup plan, and they were even more surprised by how my parents had reacted. It was like they couldn't see how messed up the whole situation was. Since then, Lily has been giving me the cold shoulder, refusing to answer my texts or calls. She's playing the victim with our parents, and I can see now just how manipulative she can be. I've realized I've let this go on for far too long, and I've decided to take a step back from communicating with my family for a while. I need space to figure things out and set some boundaries. I'm going no contact with Lily for now. It's not what I wanted, but I don't see any other way to make them understand that I'm not her backup plan. I refuse to be. Update 2. After the blow-up at the family dinner and going no contact with Lily, things got tense, but I didn't expect how quickly it would escalate. It started about a week later when I received a message from an unknown number. It was from one of Lily's ex-boyfriends. We'd met a couple of times at family gatherings, but we were never close, so it was strange for him to reach out. He said he wanted to give me a heads up. He explained that while they were dating, Lily used to mention me in a really weird way. Apparently, she'd casually tell him things like, "If this doesn't work out, I've got a backup plan," and he realized she was talking about me. He thought it was a joke at first, but she kept bringing it up, making him uncomfortable. He figured I should know, considering everything that happened between us recently. I was stunned. It was bad enough hearing Lily call me her backup plan at family events, but knowing she was talking about me like this with her boyfriends, it was disturbing. I showed Sophie the message, and she was horrified. She said it wasn't just manipulative, it was creepy and obsessive. It wasn't normal sibling behavior, and it confirmed everything I'd been feeling. We decided it was time to address this with my parents directly. I drove over to their house without calling ahead. When I got there, my mom was sitting on the porch, sipping her tea. I told her we needed to talk, and she invited me inside, looking concerned. My dad was in the living room, watching TV. I started explaining everything, the ex-boyfriend's message, the comments Lily had been making, and how uncomfortable it all was. They didn't take it seriously at all. My mom sighed and said Lily was just going through a rough patch. She told me it was my job as her brother to be there for her, especially now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pointed out that this wasn't just a rough patch, it was manipulative and unhealthy behavior. My dad chimed in, saying Lily had always been more vulnerable, and that they'd always expected me to look out for her if things went south in her life. Hearing that felt like a slap in the face. It suddenly made sense why they never took my side or why they always seemed to defend her. This expectation had been there all along, and I'd never even realized it. They saw me as a backup for Lily, just like she did. I left the house, fuming. Sophie and I talked it over, and I realized I needed to take steps to protect myself. Lily had a history of poor financial decisions, and if she was this comfortable treating me as her safety net, what would stop her from trying to involve me financially? I decided it was time to consult a lawyer. I made an appointment the next day. The lawyer listened to everything, including the messages from Lily's ex and the family dinner incident. He agreed it was concerning and suggested we take legal steps to protect my assets. He mentioned the possibility of filing a restraining order if Lily's behavior escalated, but for now he advised setting up legal barriers to make sure she couldn't try anything. I thought this would be a quiet move on my part, but somehow Lily found out. My guess is my parents told her, thinking it would make me back down. Instead, it triggered a complete meltdown. Lily called me nonstop, leaving frantic voicemails. She accused me of abandoning her and breaking family bonds. She said I was destroying the family by turning to lawyers instead of just doing the right thing as her brother. The messages were a mix of anger, pleading, and manipulation. It was like she couldn't decide if she wanted to guilt trip me or scream at me. I blocked her number after the 10th voicemail. I needed some peace, and it was clear she wasn't going to stop. Then came the ultimatum from my parents. They called me over, saying we needed to talk. I knew this wasn't going to go well, but I went anyway, hoping they might finally understand my side. Instead, they demanded I apologize to Lily and drop the issue entirely. My mom said that if I didn't, they might have to rethink my place in the family, including my share of the inheritance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were using the inheritance as leverage to make me comply. It was like they were saying my worth to them depended entirely on whether or not I played along with Lily's games. I looked at them both and told them I didn't care about the money anymore. I'd rather be financially independent than be tied to a family that manipulates and uses me. That night, I decided to post about the situation on Reddit. I needed to get it off my chest, and I wanted to hear from people who weren't involved, who might give me an unbiased perspective. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments poured in, with strangers telling me they'd been in similar situations, that I was right to stand up for myself, and that I needed to protect my future. The support gave me the confidence I needed to make a tough decision. I called my parents the next morning and told them I was going no contact until they could respect my boundaries. I wasn't cutting them off forever, but I needed space. I blocked Lily on all platforms, no more texts, no more voicemails, nothing. It felt drastic, but I knew it was the right move. The silence after blocking them was deafening, but it was also the first time I'd felt a sense of relief in weeks. I don't know what the future holds with my family, but for now, I'm focusing on my own life and my relationship with Sophie. I'm done being Lily's backup plan, and I'm done letting my parents manipulate me. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking control of my own life. I just hope it stays that way. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since I went no contact with Lily and limited contact with my parents. I was starting to feel some relief, but I knew it was only a matter of time before something happened. I didn't expect the chaos that was about to unfold, though. One afternoon, there was a loud knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mom standing there. She hadn't called or texted, just showed up unannounced. Sophie was home with me and quickly stepped in front, asking what my mom wanted. My mom, without even acknowledging Sophie, demanded to talk to me. She insisted we needed to fix things with Lily because she was heartbroken and crying every day. Sophie wasn't having any of it. She blocked the door, refusing to let my mom in. They started arguing right there in the hallway. My mom raised her voice, telling Sophie that she was the reason our family was falling apart. Neighbors started poking their heads out to see what was going on, and I could hear them whispering. It was becoming a scene. Sophie stepped back inside, shutting the door behind her, and told me to handle it before it got worse. I stepped out into the hallway, trying to calm my mom down, but she wasn't listening. She kept going on about how I'd abandoned my family, how Lily was a mess without me, and how it was my responsibility to make things right. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told her about the message I got from Lily's ex-boyfriend, the one where he said she had been talking about me as her fallback option even while they were together. My mom's face went pale for a moment, like she'd been slapped. But instead of addressing it, she just muttered, she's scared of being alone. It was like she didn't even care about how twisted this whole thing was. She just kept insisting I needed to be there for Lily, no matter what. A couple of hours later, my dad called me. He was furious that I'd spoken to a lawyer. He didn't care about why I did it. He only cared that I'd taken things outside the family. He demanded that I apologize to Lily and drop the whole thing, saying it was my duty to keep the family together. It was clear my parents were fully on Lily's side, and nothing I said was going to change their minds. I calmly told him I was done being treated as Lily's safety net, and that unless they respected my boundaries, I was prepared to go completely no contact. My dad didn't take it well. He tried to pull the inheritance card, reminding me that my future financial support could be at risk if I didn't play nice. I told him I didn't care about the money anymore. I'd rather struggle on my own than be tied to a family that only valued me as a backup plan. That's when Sophie came up with an idea. She suggested we move in together permanently, far away from the drama. We'd already been spending most of our time at her place anyway, so it made sense. I agreed. It felt like the best way to put some distance between us and my family's mess. On moving day, everything was going smoothly at first. We were loading boxes into the truck when Lily showed up out of nowhere. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her hair was a mess, and she was crying. She ran up to us, demanding to know why I was doing this to her. She pointed at Sophie, accusing her of stealing me away. She even tried to grab one of my boxes, saying I wasn't allowed to leave. A small crowd started to gather, neighbors watching the whole scene unfold. Lily was screaming, saying I was abandoning her, that I was breaking our family apart. Sophie, staying calm as always, took out her phone and started filming. She whispered to me that it was just in case we needed proof later. That only made Lily angrier. She lunged at Sophie, trying to grab the phone. It got so out of control that one of the neighbors called the police. When they arrived, I explained that Lily had been harassing me and we were just trying to move without any drama. The officer spoke to Lily, warning her to leave us alone. She stormed off, screaming that I'd regret this. After that, Sophie and I sat down and seriously discussed filing a restraining order. I didn't want to take it that far, but her behavior was becoming unhinged. It wasn't just an argument anymore, it felt like she was stalking us. I decided to talk to my lawyer about our options. A couple of days later, I started hearing from mutual friends. They told me that my parents and Lily were spreading rumors about me, saying I was an ungrateful son who had turned his back on the family after they supported me my whole life. They were painting me as the bad guy, and some of our extended family members had already started taking sides. But then, something unexpected happened. I got a call from an estranged aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me she'd heard the rumors and wanted to give me a heads up. She said she wasn't surprised. They'd done the same thing to her years ago when she refused to comply with their expectations. She'd been cut off for standing up for herself, and she wanted me to know I wasn't alone. She offered me advice and told me to protect myself legally and financially. I took her advice and officially filed paperwork with my lawyer to protect my assets. We froze the joint accounts I had with my parents, making sure they couldn't access my funds without my consent. It felt like a necessary step, especially after everything that had happened. For now, I'm trying to move forward with Sophie and start this new chapter without the constant weight of my family's expectations. It's been a whirlwind, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but at least I'm finally taking control of my own life. Update 4. After securing legal protection and freezing my joint accounts with my parents, I thought things would calm down. I was wrong. My lawyer was still digging into the financial documents, making sure there were no loose ends. Then, he called me into his office one morning, saying he'd found something I needed to see. He handed me a stack of papers showing a hidden bank account under Lily's name. It wasn't just any account, it was funded by significant contributions from my parents. We're talking large sums of money, transferred regularly over the years. My lawyer pointed out that while my parents had been pressuring me about inheritance and claiming there wasn't much left for anyone, they were secretly funneling money into this account for Lily. I couldn't wrap my head around it at first. It felt like confirmation of everything I'd been feeling but couldn't prove. Lily was the golden child, and I was just there to pick up the pieces whenever she needed. My parents had been helping her financially all this time, even as they guilt-tripped me about family loyalty and inheritance. I felt betrayed, but it was time to confront them with the evidence. I asked my lawyer to set up a meeting with my parents at his office. I knew they wouldn't come willingly, but when I told them it was about a legal issue concerning the family trust, they agreed. When they walked in, they looked confused, like they were expecting a routine discussion. I laid the documents on the table and asked them directly about the hidden account. My mom's face went white, and my dad just stared at the papers, trying to compose himself. They stammered out excuses, saying it was just to help Lily get back on her feet after a few rough patches. They acted like it was a minor thing, like it wasn't a big deal. But my lawyer wasn't having it. He explained that the financial manipulation we uncovered gave me grounds to contest the entire family trust and inheritance arrangement. My parents looked stunned, finally realizing the gravity of the situation. Before they could say anything more, my phone started buzzing nonstop. It was Lily, blowing up my phone with a barrage of abusive texts. She'd obviously heard about the legal threats and was having another meltdown. Her messages were filled with accusations, claiming I was destroying the family and ruining everything. I blocked her number right there in the office. A few days later, my parents called for an emergency family meeting. I knew this wasn't going to be a calm discussion, so I insisted it take place in a public setting, a quiet cafe downtown, with my lawyer present. They weren't happy about it, but they agreed. When we arrived, the tension was palpable. My parents looked tense, and Lily was visibly on edge, her eyes red like she'd been crying. I didn't waste any time and brought up the hidden account, demanding an explanation. Lily broke down almost immediately. She started sobbing, saying she always felt like she wasn't good enough. She admitted she used me as a safety net because our parents made her feel entitled to my support. She pointed at them, saying they'd set us up against each other from the beginning, making her believe she deserved more because she was the vulnerable one. My parents looked horrified, but not for the reasons you'd expect. They were defensive, trying to deny everything, claiming they'd never manipulated us. But their story was full of holes. They kept contradicting themselves, and it was clear they were scrambling to cover their tracks. I just sat there, watching them dig themselves deeper. Then, something unexpected happened. My estranged aunt walked into the cafe. I hadn't seen her in years, but she looked calm, almost relieved to be there. She laid a folder on the table and began pulling out documents of her own. She revealed even more financial manipulation, showing a pattern of favoritism that had affected multiple relatives, not just me. She told us stories about how our parents had done the same thing to her years ago when she didn't fall in line with their expectations. They'd cut her off and spread lies about her, just like they were doing to me now. The cafe turned into a scene of chaos. Lily was sobbing uncontrollably, my parents were shouting, and the aunt was sitting there calmly, like she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. She looked at me and said, "I'm glad someone finally stood up to them." I realized there was no point in continuing the conversation. I stood up and told my parents I was done with the family drama. I wasn't going to listen to any more excuses or lies. I walked out of that cafe without looking back, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The next day, I went to the bank and closed every joint account I still had with my parents. I set up new accounts with no family involvement, cutting off any financial ties they had to me. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. A few days later, I received a voicemail from Lily. Her voice was shaky and filled with tears. She apologized, saying she didn't realize how much she was hurting me and that she'd just been doing what she thought she was supposed to. It sounded sincere, but I couldn't trust it. I texted her back, simply saying, "I accept your apology, but I need space. I can't be your backup plan anymore." I blocked her number after that. I did the same with my parents. I needed a break from everything, from the manipulation, the lies, the expectations. It was time for me to focus on myself and start healing without their influence hanging over my head. For the first time in a long while, the silence feels good. I don't know what comes next, but I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to move on, even if it means leaving my family behind for good. Update 5. After cutting ties with my parents and Lily, Sophie and I decided it was time for a real fresh start. We found a new apartment in a different city, far enough away that we wouldn't have to worry about any surprise visits from family. It was a nice place, with big windows and lots of light. Everything felt new and hopeful. We settled in quickly, unpacking boxes and making it our own. It was the first time in a long while that I felt like I could breathe. I started a new job around the same time. It wasn't a huge leap career-wise, but it was something I was genuinely interested in, and it kept me busy. The change of pace was exactly what I needed. Sophie and I also decided to start attending therapy together. It was eye-opening. We talked through everything. My family's manipulation, the years of feeling like I had to be Lily's safety net, and the impact it had on our relationship. The therapist helped me see just how toxic the dynamic had been and how long I'd been conditioned to put my family's needs above my own. A few weeks into this new chapter, I got a message from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. He'd seen my Reddit post and reached out, saying he'd experienced similar treatment from our family. He told me stories that sounded all too familiar, how our parents had played favorites, how they'd pressured him to help Lily when she needed it, and how he'd been cut off when he started setting boundaries. He offered his support, saying he was glad someone was finally standing up to them. It felt good to know I wasn't alone in this. Around the same time, my estranged aunt got back in touch. She'd heard about everything that went down and invited Sophie and me to her home for a weekend getaway. I was hesitant at first, family trust issues and all that, but Sophie convinced me to go. The aunt's place was a cozy cottage by the lake, a perfect escape from all the drama. We spent the weekend relaxing, talking, and getting to know each other again. It was the healthiest family connection I'd felt in a long time. On our last night there, my aunt pulled me aside and handed me a thick envelope. Inside were documents she'd been holding onto for years. They were proof that my father had illegally altered the terms of the family trust fund, diverting a significant portion of it to Lily. It was exactly the kind of evidence my lawyer had been looking for, a legal bombshell that could change everything. I took the documents straight to my lawyer. He reviewed them and told me we had a strong case. We could sue for damages and challenge the entire trust fund arrangement. It wasn't just about the money, it was about accountability. My parents had manipulated everything for years, hiding the truth while pressuring me about family loyalty. This was my chance to finally expose their actions. As expected, when my parents found out about the legal action, they panicked. They sent me a long handwritten letter begging for forgiveness. They asked me to settle things privately, promising they'd make it right if I just dropped the case. It was a desperate attempt to avoid public scrutiny and legal consequences, but I wasn't interested in private apologies or hush money. This wasn't about reconciling with them, it was about holding them accountable for the manipulation and lies. I told my lawyer to move forward with the case. It was a long, drawn-out process, but with the evidence we had, the outcome was clear. We won. The court ruled in my favor, and I received a significant settlement. It wasn't just about the money, though. The real victory was knowing the truth had come out, that my parents' manipulations were exposed for what they were. It felt like the final piece of closure I needed. After the case ended, I decided to make the no contact permanent. I blocked my parents and Lily on everything, no more texts, calls, or letters. It was time to close that chapter of my life for good. The only family I stayed in touch with was my aunt. She became like a second mother to me, offering genuine love and support without any strings attached. It was a relationship I never thought I'd have, and I was grateful for it. Sophie and I started planning our future together. We got engaged in a small, intimate ceremony at the lake house, with just a few close friends and my aunt in attendance. It was simple and perfect, nothing like the over-the-top family gatherings I'd grown up with. For once, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, without any hidden agendas or manipulative tactics. I shared one final update on Reddit after everything was settled. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments came in, congratulating me on the court victory and offering words of support. People shared their own stories of toxic family dynamics, thanking me for showing them it was possible to stand up for yourself and walk away. It felt like a full-circle moment, seeing how many others related to what I'd gone through. In my final words, I left a message for anyone who might be feeling trapped in a similar situation. For anyone out there who feels like they're stuck in a toxic family dynamic, know that it's okay to walk away and build your own happiness. You're not a backup plan, and you deserve to be your own priority. The post went viral, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I'd shared my story, found my voice, and reclaimed my life. I wasn't looking back anymore.